Stop for a second. Look at the phone in your hand. Is it an iPhone or is it an Android? The odds are overwhelming that you just answered yes to one of those two options. For over a decade, the mobile world has been a duopoly, a two-horse race dominated by Apple and Google. But there was a time, not so long ago, when one of the biggest, most powerful companies on the planet tried to launch an attack. This was a company with near total control over the desktop operating system, and they sought to establish a crucial third ecosystem. They sank billions of dollars into this effort. They even bought an entire phone company for the attempt. And yet, it all ended in a humiliating, comprehensive, and fascinating failure. This is the story of Windows Phone and Windows 10 Mobile. It's a technology scandal of epic proportions. This whole saga proves that even tech giants can bleed and stumble. To understand the true depths of this failure, we have to rewind a little bit. Microsoft wasn't a stranger to the mobile world initially. Long before the iPhone changed everything, there was Windows Mobile. These were clunky, stylus-driven devices designed primarily for business users. They were built for the kind of people who spent their days deeply embedded in Outlook. But then, 2007 happened, and everything changed. The iPhone burst onto the scene, bringing with it a revolutionary touchscreen interface. Crucially, it also introduced a simplified, accessible App Store. Google's Android followed soon after, rapidly gaining momentum. They fundamentally redefined what a smartphone was supposed to be. Suddenly, Windows Mobile looked absolutely archaic. It became a legacy sunset product designed for a world that no longer existed and was quickly fading. This was a classic case of technological complacency on Microsoft's part. They were simply too focused on the enterprise market to see the consumer revolution coming over the horizon. By 2010, Windows Mobile was functionally dead, obsolete. But Microsoft, ever the optimist, decided they weren't going to retreat entirely from the mobile space. Instead, they were going to rebuild from the ground up with a completely fresh approach. This brings us to Chapter 1, the birth of Metro. In 2010, the world met Windows Phone 7. And honestly, it was genuinely different, even beautiful in its own way. Microsoft called their new design language Metro. It was characterized by flat, bold typography and bright, live tiles. These dynamic squares showed real-time information right on the home screen. It felt like a breath of fresh air when compared to the dense rows of static icons on iOS and Android. It wasn't just a skin, either. It was a completely new operating philosophy. The interface was meticulously designed to be about information at a glance, minimizing the need to constantly dive into individual apps. Many reviewers at the time hailed it as a superior interface design. They noted it was smoother, faster, and more elegant than the competition, especially on lower-end hardware. Microsoft also made a smart strategic move initially. They imposed strict hardware requirements on all their partners. This ensured a consistent and high-quality user experience across all Windows Phone devices, preventing fragmentation. They had the innovative interface, they had consistent hardware partners, and they possessed the immense brand recognition of Windows. So, with all that going for it, why did it still fail so comprehensively? The answer, as it always is in the complex mobile world, came down to one crucial word: ecosystem. A mobile operating system is fundamentally only as useful as the applications that run on it. When Windows Phone 7 launched, it immediately faced what quickly became known as the app gap. Think about it. Developers are rational actors in the market. They are going to spend their valuable time and money building apps for the platforms where the users already are. In 2010, the vast majority of users were already firmly planted on iOS and Android. Windows Phone had almost no user base to start with, which was its fundamental weakness. So, when a new flashy Windows Phone came out, a consumer would ask a very simple, crucial question. Does it have Instagram? Does it have my banking app? Does it have Snapchat? The answer, far too often, was a dispiriting no. This single issue proved to be fatal. This lack of apps created a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle of failure. This cycle is the true technical disaster at the heart of the entire Windows Phone story. Users didn't buy the phone because the applications they needed weren't there on the platform. And conversely, developers didn't build the apps because the users weren't there to download them and generate revenue. Microsoft tried desperately to break this punishing cycle. They offered massive financial incentives to lure developers over. They were literally paying development firms to port their existing apps over to the platform. They created advanced developer tools that were supposed to make cross-platform porting easier than ever. But it was like trying to stop a massive tidal wave with nothing but a small bucket. It was an impossible Sisyphean task. Major services were incredibly slow to arrive, or they arrived much too late to matter. Worse, when they did arrive, they were often severely feature-limited versions of the iOS or Android originals. The most famous example of this hostility was the YouTube situation. The official YouTube app was repeatedly killed by Google, citing technical compliance issues. This forced Microsoft to create its own non-official clients, leading to a nasty public spat. This was a brutal act of market warfare and platform hostility. Microsoft was losing this war on the application front, and they knew it. They needed something radical to change the trajectory. By 2011, the writing was increasingly on the wall for Windows Phone. Microsoft needed a Hail Mary pass, a massive, game-changing move, and they found it in a deep, desperate partnership with the fading giant Nokia. Nokia was a company that had truly fallen from grace. They had been the undisputed king of mobile phones for years, but their own smart operating system, Symbian, had become another painful sunset product. Symbian was unable to compete effectively with the modern threats of iOS and Android. In an act of corporate drama and a spectacle of technical hubris, Nokia essentially scrapped their entire internal software efforts. They committed completely and exclusively to the Windows Phone platform. This deep collaboration immediately gave the platform a powerful, recognizable face and a brand name consumers trusted. Most importantly, the Nokia partnership brought some incredible, industry-leading hardware to the ecosystem. The Nokia Lumia line, particularly models like the Lumia 920, introduced truly groundbreaking mobile technologies. These features included phenomenal camera optics, pure motion displays that looked great, and innovative wireless charging capabilities. The hardware in the Lumia devices was often objectively superior to the competition available at the same price points. But the brilliance of the hardware simply could not overcome the terminal flaw. They still couldn't fix the app gap. People would admire the Lumia's camera quality, but they still ultimately bought an iPhone or a Galaxy. They switched because they couldn't live without the social apps, the utility apps, and the games their friends and family were using. The consumer experience, led by apps, trumped the hardware excellence. The troubled partnership culminated dramatically in 2013 with a move that stunned the entire tech industry. Microsoft acquired Nokia's Devices and Services division. The price tag was over $7 billion. This was no longer a partnership, it was a full aggressive absorption of a former leader. Microsoft was now fully all in on the platform. They were going to build both the devices and the software, controlling the entire vertical stack, just like Apple. The strategy was clear. Force the issue by controlling every aspect of the phone. But what exactly could still go wrong with this unified $7 billion effort? Well, a lot, as it tragically turned out. The acquisition was a classic textbook example of throwing good money after bad. By the time the Nokia deal was fully complete, the mobile market share for Windows Phone was already locked into the low single digits. Then came the next major pivot, in a desperate attempt to reset the narrative. In 2015, Microsoft tried to unify its entire operating system under one comprehensive banner, Windows 10. The underlying plan was brilliant on paper. Conceptually, Windows 10 Mobile would share the exact same core with the much larger desktop version. This would allow developers to create Universal Windows Platform, or UWP apps. These UWP apps could theoretically run seamlessly on your PC, your tablet, and your phone, all from a single code base. The idea was clearly designed to solve the app gap by leveraging the massive, established installed base of Windows PCs. Developers would simply write one app for the PC, and bingo, they'd get a phone app almost for free. It was a very compelling proposition for cross-device utility. But the execution of this complex strategy was a historical, technical disaster. First, the Universal Windows Platform development model never really achieved critical mass or took off widely. PC developers, who were already used to established, profitable methods, weren't rushing to adopt the new and complex platform. Second, the mobile version of Windows 10 was plagued from the start. It suffered from constant bugs, inconsistent performance across different devices, and a disastrous, confusing rollout process. Microsoft was fundamentally trying to cram a desktop operating system into a small phone form factor. The result was undeniably clunky and unreliable for many users. This era was marked by the launch of flagship phones like the Lumia 950 and 950 XL. These new phones introduced a truly cool feature called Continuum. This allowed you to plug your phone into a monitor and keyboard and run a full desktop-like environment. It was forward-thinking, it was brilliant in concept, and it felt like the true future of mobile computing. But it was a future that virtually nobody bought into. Consumers were already anchored in the familiar, app-rich, and stable trenches of iOS and Android. A cool feature couldn't fix a broken ecosystem. The final act of this entire technology scandal is arguably the most painful and decisive. In 2015 and 2016, Microsoft finally started to admit the scale of the defeat, publicly and financially. The painful acquisition of Nokia proved to be a catastrophic financial loss for the company. Under the new CEO, Satya Nadella, the company was forced to write down the vast majority of the acquisition cost. That massive write-down amounted to about $7.6 billion. They also fired almost 8,000 employees, mostly from the former Nokia division. It was a stunning public acknowledgement of a truly monumental failure. They failed completely to establish that critical third ecosystem. Nadella was eventually brutally honest about the core reason for the failure. "We missed mobile," he famously said. The subsequent failure of Windows Phone was the attempt to correct that initial strategic miss. This correction was attempted with overwhelming financial force and corporate muscle, instead of necessary foresight. Windows 10 Mobile ultimately limped on for just a few more years. It mostly served a small group of loyalists and some enterprise customers who used specific niche apps. But by 2017, the company officially stopped developing any new features for the platform. Finally, in 2019, they ended all necessary support entirely. The ambitious, expensive dream was finally over. Windows Phone had achieved a sub 1% market share and faded into the digital history books. So, what are the key takeaways from the whole Windows Phone and Windows 10 mobile saga? This isn't just a simple story about one failed product. It's a critical, high-stakes case study in platform dynamics and ecosystem gravity. First, the most important lesson: ecosystem is king. Microsoft had all the money, the brand, power, and the technical talent in the world. But they learned the hard way that the operating system itself is just the necessary foundation. The real value is held in the powerful network effect of the applications, the users, and the developers. Without that critical mass of people and software, even the best interface and hardware are rendered meaningless. Second, timing is everything. Microsoft reacted to the iPhone's revolution far too slowly. By the time Windows Phone 7 was finally ready to launch, Android was already fully ascendant. iOS was deeply entrenched and generating massive revenue. They were playing catch-up in a game that was already 90% over before they even started. Third, never mistake momentum for entrenchment. Microsoft was so overwhelmingly successful in the PC era that they genuinely believed their influence and money could simply force a third platform into existence. The mobile market, however, proved to be a different, brutal beast entirely. It was a market that prioritized consumer desire and application availability over raw corporate muscle and historical legacy. The ultimate, lasting lesson of this billion-dollar boondoggle is clear. The barriers to entry in a mature digital market are no longer technical at all. They are entirely human, economic, and rooted in network effects. You can certainly build a better phone with superior optics and features, but if you can't convince the world to build the essential apps for it, you're selling nothing more than a beautifully designed paperweight. What great technology scandals do you think we should dissect next on the channel? Let me know all your suggestions in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the biggest historical technical disasters in modern tech, hit that like button and subscribe to Tech Fails. Until next time,